Hi everyone, I'm Luke Hector and you're watching The Broken Meeple. This is a YouTube channel about board games where I give reviews, top 10s and my honest opinions, regardless of the consequences.
Get on with it.
First off, let me just say thank you to everybody. The reception for the new content I've got on this channel has been overwhelmingly positive, and I don't just mean in terms of comment feedback, I mean in terms of views. I mean, these videos are surpassing the growth rate of something like Revive, my review for that, and that is a massive 25-minute long full complete review, pros and cons, tons of editing and stuff required, and these are just surpassing that. So I think that kind of says it all. So these series are here to stay, and certainly we've got another shelf to talk about today, and this time I am choosing at random this one. This is my lookout game shelf effectively. So this has basically a heavy Uwe Rosenberg feel to it, because let's face it, everything on there apart from one game is Uwe Rosenberg. So here we go. What does it consist of? We got Great Plains, we got Agricola, all creatures big and small. We have got Atiwa, or Atiwa, I think it's Atiwa. I'm probably butchering the pronunciation, but basically the newest one about fruit bats. And then we kind of have the same game, but in two boxes. We have Caverna with the fantastic, oh god, here we go, heavy, the Cave Farmers. Caverna the Cave Farmers with Caverna Forgotten Folk, easily the best expansion for it. So why don't we take the small ones first? Alright, let's go up in order of size. So for now, let's see, nope, sorry, we'll get to you fruit bats later. You must leave the camera view now. Okie doke, so the Great Plains. This is a very tiny little two-player only game, and I don't normally keep a lot of two-player only games, with the exception of maybe Cosmos and one or two others, but this is one that I've kept around, even though I think I only gave it a 7 out of 10 when I reviewed it, mainly because of just how simplistic this is. A lot of games, I worry that because I don't play them for years, then I come back to it and I'm like, oh god, how does this work again? This is so dirt simple. I mean, this is basically what's in the box. There you go. Come on. There. That's it. That's all that's in the box. So, few tokens, bunch of tiles, bag of your player meeples, which is basically one is foxes and one is snakes, and a tiny little rulebook. And I mean tiny. That's the rulebook. It literally is. Setup, main rules, end of the game. Done. This is so straightforward. It's an area control game where you randomly set up a map at the start of the game with these tiles, and these tiles build a map. You're trying to control the yellow areas with your pieces. It's a dirt strip simple area control game. But the crux is, you start at one of 3 cave locations on the map, which you dictate before the game starts, and then you can only place one of your meeples on essentially the cave space next to it, or next to another one of the meeples you've got. So you have to kind of like lead out of the cave and go, take over these areas. The yellow areas score you points based on how big the area is at the end of the game. So there's an emphasis on going for the big areas to control for more points, but then there's also an incentive to go for the smaller areas because they're easier to take command of. You've only got so many of these pieces, and your movement is restricted based on only being able to go next to one of your other pieces. But you can pick up these little tokens like eagle, bear, and fox, as a wolf, sorry, which basically allow you to sort of jump over mountains or jump over terrain you couldn't normally. And so there is a good balancing act between trying to get on the yellow areas and maybe picking up some of those tokens and giving you a little bit more flexibility with the movement. It's just really straightforward and simple. I mean, you can teach this in 2 seconds. It's that simple. But it does get to be quite a tight little area control game. I mean, you are trying to go for these areas, but you can see where the opponent can go, and as soon as they start creeping to your areas, you're like, ugh, should I do something about it? Or maybe I should venture over to here. You're deciding where your 3 caves are going to be at the start of the game is already pretty important. I mean, it's not game breaking, but you should, do you spread out, or do you take one area pretty much for yourself? That's entirely up to you as well. But man, I've had a great time teaching this at, not necessarily game cons, but more the teaching events I used to do with dice. I even managed to teach some mates it. I think I've even managed to teach my dad it, which is saying something. But it's just so straightforward, and it takes no time to set up. You want to vary the game a bit, you literally just flip the tiles over randomly and then piece the map together again. So you've got all sorts of different combinations with this, and it's just one of those nice little simple games. Now, do I get it played often? No, and that is the thing. 2-player games are hard for me to get to the table. And I gave this one a 7 out of 10. It's a good game, but it's not going to blow your mind, but it's just super smooth and elegant, and that has to be praised. So the question is, do I want to keep it? You know what? yeah, it is a keeper for now. It's small enough that it can hide away on that shelf without taking much space, and that certainly does, give it some advantage. It's a small, it could even be a smaller box, frankly, but this is not exactly a huge space killer. But it's just the fact that it is so easy to get back to. I could not play this for another 5 years, come back to it, and I'd be able to learn it in 5 seconds again. It's just that straightforward. Not a lot of people have heard about it. Most people haven't really sort of given it looks, but if you like just simple, pure as nails area control, and you want a 2-player only game that you could teach to literally anybody on the planet, kid, adult, old person, new gamer, old gamer, whatever, this is certainly something to give a look at. I give it props for what it is. But yeah, it's a keeper. It can sit there for a while and not really cause me any harm. Right, now we got Agricola. Well, I say Agricola. Agricola. All creatures big and small. This is the 2-player variant, and this is the big box version, which basically just gives you all the expansions that it ever had in one box. This is essentially just like playing Agricola, except you now have, just 2 of you. You've got a board similar to Agricola where you put workers on for action spaces, but rather than doing the whole Agricola farming thing, which was all the corn, the veg, the getting kids, the heating your house and that, this one is more concerned with simply getting the animals and putting them in fenced paddocks, which to be honest is probably one of the more fun aspects of Agricola, frankly. I don't really care about heating my home and feeding my people. I'm more interested in having all the, growing the vegetables and having the cute animals everywhere. Now, this suffers from the same problem that a lot of the other 2-player games, as I mentioned, don't get it played very often. And this one, I get played often less than most. Not because I don't like it, but because it requires a bit more of a teach. It requires a bit more setup. The rules are fairly straightforward, but you have got, a decent amount of pieces in here. You have got different ways to score. You have got all the different action spaces and how they repopulate, etc. And it's not the smallest game in the world. I mean, the rulebook is still got quite a few pages in it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 pages for rules, and then you've got the appendix for all the buildings. This isn't really a pick up and play 2-player game. This is more for gamers. You could maybe teach this to someone who's relatively new to gaming, but there's still a decent amount going on in here. This is Agricola Light, basically. If you've got Agricola, and then you've got the Agricola Family Edition, this is Agricola Family Edition Light for only 2 players. It really is like that. But that's not to say that this is a light game. This still has a decent amount going on it. And okay, maybe medium game is pushing it a little bit, but still, I could not teach this to my parents. I would have to read the rules to this again, really understand what's going on, and then get back into it. But when I have done that, it's been good fun. But how often is it ever going to get played? That is the problem. I like the idea of going around and, building these little, unique buildings that change every game, so it adds a bit of variety. I love doing the whole fencing paddock thing. I mean, if that was your favourite aspect of Caverna and Agricola, well then you're in luck, because that is exactly what happens here. It's all about the animals. So, I mean, it is called All Creatures Big and Small, what do you expect? But it does a good job of being a lighter farming version of Agricola. The problem is just being able to get it played is so rare, because whereas Great Plains I can pick up again in 5 minutes and have no problem with it, this one I can't. I have to go away and relearn it and go, oh yeah, that's how it all works. And when you consider this is meant to be a 30-minute game on the box, that was 7 pages of heavy text rules. Not to say that the rulebook is bad. I mean, you will be able to learn this game again. But for a game that's only taking you 30 odd minutes to play, and I would probably say that's actually kind of optimistic, I'd say it's more about 45 minutes, you could possibly even get to an hour, but that's a decent amount of rules for the time length that it is. And I remember having the original version of this, selling it, and then getting this big box version because it was on offer, or maybe it was a brilliant buy, I can't remember, and just thinking, yeah, but I do like it. But maybe that's some nostalgia goggles talking for me. Maybe it's just my love of the farming games. The fact that I love this theme. Maybe that's just interfering with my brain here. The brain says no, but the heart says yes, and some of that is definitely coming into play. I think Agricola Creatures Big and Small, if I've got to be brutally honest myself, has to be on the cull pile. Now, I hope I don't have to sell this again, because having to bought and sold only to have the same conclusion is not something I want. But it's also not the smallest box. I mean, this is taking up a decent amount of space on that shelf. But I do hope that one day I can bring this out again. I mean, if some friends visit, maybe I could put this one higher on the priority list to get played. But I do like it. But I've got to be sensible and consider that maybe if space is a premium, then I gotta decide that this one has to go. So, do really like it. I do recommend it. But for me, 2-player only games, they suffer a little bit, and this one suffers just a little bit more than most.
You cut me deep, Shrek. You cut me real deep just now.
Now, I can't talk about this next one without getting my little friend out. Here we are, the little fruit bat. I'm not even sure if I've given him a name, actually, but to be honest, like I say, it's a cute little fruit bat. Look at him, he's adorable.
Take that, you winged spawn of Satan!
He likes the fact that I'm talking about this game here, and this looks a damn sight cuter than that thing does. I mean, what is that supposed to be? Man-bear bat? I don't know, it's... I know that's what they look like, but it basically does look like a bear's head on a bat with eyes and that. I mean, it is man-bear bat. I swear this should appear in South Park at some point. Man-bear bat and man-bear pig. It could work, but I digress. Atiwa is basically Uwe Rosenberg's newest game, as far as I'm aware. I don't think he's done anything else since then. Well, maybe Applejacks, but in terms of this whole farming thing, it's pretty much the newest one. And this one is very different from a lot of his other games. A lot of people might have looked at this and thought, oh, this is going to be the same as another Caverna, another Agricola, another Nooseward, another, what was that other one I wasn't a fan of? Oh, Halito and stuff like that. This one plays very differently to those, and it's all the better for it. This one is actually going up in my estimations. I reviewed this and gave it an 8 out of 10. I think now, after some more recent plays, I could actually up that to a 9. This is definitely... I know that sounds like spoiler alert for the end of the segment, but hear me out on this one. This one is more about spatial awareness and resource management than it is about anything else. The rules are not very complex. I mean, yeah, it may look like a biggish book, but it's mostly big text, and as you read this, it just clicks. Nothing in here feels particularly fiddly. But essentially what you're doing is you're harvesting a bucket load of these fruit bats, and there is a ton of them in there. I thought in my first game we were never going to use as many bats, and we nearly ran out the bag. But it's a worker placement game, so again, worker placement, but here's the slight twist. You've got a bolt-on bit for different players, but essentially with this board is you've only got 3 workers. Only 3. Never more, never less. So there's none of this thing that you get in worker placements where, oh, I start off with 2, but I can't get up to 6, and I really should get 5 or 6, because if I don't, I'm going to lose the game. And a lot of worker placement games suffer from this. But then stuff like Architects of the West Kingdom, for example, throws a twist on that, which makes me like them more. This one, similarly, I just like the fact that you never have to get more workers. You have 3, the game is tight enough with 3 as it is, and that's good enough for me. I don't have to faff around with that aspect. So what exactly are you doing? Well, you've got a personal track. And where can I find the track? Here we go. The board is kind of in a mess. But essentially everybody's got this resource track with wild animals, fruit, bats, and families and stuff. And so you're populating these different like square grid cards, these locations that can store the different things that you have on this track, but you're restricted as to what you can store. I mean, a plantation might have a ton of tree spaces, but you can't store wild animals on them. Some might be empty, in which case you can pick and choose depending on what else is on the map tile. But essentially, all your resources are a closed personal economy. So they come from this board, nowhere else. If you get goats for milking, if you get like the trees and the fruit that goes on them, they come from here, they go back to here. The bats are the only thing that come out, and gold, which is basically just points and the currency, but everything else is closed. So as I get more wild animals, this is it, this is my limit. And if I eat them for any reason, they go back on this board. But that may not sound like particularly amazing, but you've already got the spatial awareness of storing everything on these cards, which is really cool. What I love with this is that when you get to the income phase at the end of a round, which the rounds are pretty quick, I mean, you've only got to put 3 workers each, even on a 4-player game, that's only 12 workers, the round is done pretty quickly. But You then go through this income phase from top to bottom where you look at the uncovered symbols and it links to the one below it. So if I've uncovered 4 wild animals, I get 2 trees. Okay, I lift off 2 trees. This now allows me to get 4 fruit. All right, I put the fruit on. And this now allows me now to get 2 bats. And it all kind of trickles down this board. The families require feeding. I mean, this is Uri Rosenberg. I'm pretty sure he was starved as a kid or something, because every game needs to be about feeding. But you can mitigate that with goats. And it sounds like something you've seen before, but the thing I give props with this, every more I play it, is just how elegant and smooth it is. This doesn't feel fiddly. Nothing in this game is clunky. The most clunky thing I can even remotely think of is that you get to send your bats out at night because they effectively go eat stuff, they poop, guano and all that, and they make more trees. But you tend to forget to do that a lot at the end of your turn, and sometimes you have to backtrack. That's about as clunky as it ever gets. The income phase, the worker placement, the breeding, because yes, you can breed if you meet certain criteria, all of that super smooth. Easy to teach this game. It's midway, it's not heavy, it's not light, it's mid, but you have that cool puzzle of trying to arrange everything on these cards. And you've got a decent variety of the ones you can get during the game, but you've also got the settlements that you build. And everything's worth points. You get a lot of families to get more points, but then you got to feed them. That cuts into the rest of your economy. Instead, you can just grab a bunch of these outside forest tiles, litter them up with bats and get points that way. You won't necessarily make a lot of gold because your families harvest gold, but then you won't pollute the environment either because depending on whether your families are trained, you have that other aspect. There's a lot of stuff to think about in this game, but the puzzle is still understandable, but really engaging. I really enjoy it. And these action spaces can change from game to game as well, because you essentially have these tiles that slide across to tell you what round it is, fantastic, but also to vary how the action spaces are. There's just a lot of cool stuff that this game does, and you can play it solo if you just want to beat your own score thing, but given how smooth this is, it's also got a worker placement element similar to Feast of Odin, where you put workers on the table, and then on the next round, those workers stay there, so you can't use those spots again. I love it in Feast of Odin, and it works great here. There's just a lot of good stuff about this. I mean, I'm praising this game like crazy. Maybe I really was a little bit harsh giving it an 8, and I did say it was very close to a 9, I think, in that review. I was very close to giving it a 9. I think nowadays, I think it does deserve a 9. I think this is a really cool game that people need to try out. And for that sake, it's a keeper. Of course it's a keeper. I mean, I've raved about it enough. It's gone up in my estimation since before. And yeah, this is definitely sitting on my shelf. You know, when I bring it out for friends, they're really glad to see it come out. And I'm happy to teach this because it doesn't feel like there's a lot of downtime. The turns are quick. Whatever action you do on the board is super fast. The income phase is simultaneous. And teaching it is a breeze. This works up to 4 players, which is great. Although, I do stress that there may be a little bit too much freedom with less players, because you only get a slight restriction on the number of spaces on the board, and with 2 of you, you're not really in each other's faces much. With 4 of you, though, oh boy, you're hoping that your spaces aren't being taken. But yeah, it's just really cool. So you can be nice and happy that I like your game. And finally, we got the big one. Here we go. Caverna, along with the Forgotten Folk. Now, I'm not going to go into too much detail into both individually. I'm just going to tackle it all at the same time. I have said many a time that a Caverna, for me, beats out Agricola.
I'll give you a piece of
And here come the pitchforks. Yes, I know. A lot of people will dispute that, but then a lot of people will agree. Honestly, I think we just agree to disagree at this point, because I do give Agricola respect. There's just aspects of Agricola I don't like. I don't like how stupidly tight it is. I don't like how getting a full family of people and workers is pretty much mandatory in the game. Like, if you don't, you'll fail. And I don't like how punishing it is with the whole scoring system of negative points if you don't have one of something. I mean, there's a little element of that in this, but very barely. But I hate the idea that if I just don't get that one vegetable, I lose a bunch of points, and that might as well cost me the game because the scores are so tight. With that one, it just, I don't know, it does a lot of things I like, but it just maybe squeezes the life force out of you a little bit too much for my liking. This one gives you a lot more freedom. If I want to have a farm that is nothing but sheep, I can have a farm that is nothing but sheep, and it doesn't penalise me for it much. Yes, you lose a couple of points if you don't have certain animal types. Whoopie-doo, your scores can break 100 points if you're doing well, so who cares about a couple of points? But I will get no cap on the sheep. So it's not like in the other game, oh, you've got 4 more sheep, well, you're limited to 3 points, that's it. Here, no, if I've got 25 sheep, I get 25 points. Great. And it was just a fun strategy to try out and do. You don't have to get all your workers in this. You can go all the way up to 6 dwarfs, as it's called, 6 workers, but you can survive pretty well with 3 or 4 and not have too much trouble. And in fact, if you try to go to 5 and 6, you'll have a lot of actions to do, but man, it takes a lot of effort to get to 5 and 6 workers, particularly 6. It could be more detrimental than you think. Of course, you can't play the whole game with no extra workers. There is that, because you probably will lose, but still, it's great that it's not forcing my hand as much. But the amount of pieces in here is just ridiculous. I mean, I am not getting it all out because this has got folded space inserts and everything, but you have got all these boards. It is a table hog through and through, but at least it's all nicely organized, folded space for the win. They create all these great inserts for me, and yeah, this is no exception. I mean, look at that. The tiles are just so neatly organized. It makes setup for this game a breeze. If you don't have an insert for this game, setup's going to be a bit of a chore. Now, I've already done a review on the most recent expansion, what was it called, Fiendish Fiends or something, and I didn't like it, put it that way. Check out my review for more details, but suffice to say, it takes Caverna and tries to cater it back towards Agricola. Don't like it, hate the expansion. Yeah, spoiler alert, I didn't like it, but check out the review for my reasons why, because Beyond the Base game needs more love and care at this point. But one thing I will give props to is the Forgotten Folk expansion. This is the one that I put my stock behind. Now, I can take or leave playing with it, because you can argue that teaching this with the expansion is good and bad. These basically provide you with player asymmetric factions to play. So this is I've got a dual setup with here. So the folded space insert caters for the Forgotten Folk expansion. But essentially what you have is a bunch of these different factions that you can play. So I can play the Pale Ones, the Halflings, the Adventurers, the Silicoids or whatever, which are basically I don't know, they're basically rock people that eat stone, which is quite funny. Mountain dwarfs, elves, trolls, dark elves, and goblins and stuff. And the idea is that these give you some advantages and disadvantages in certain ways and kind of gear you to a specific play style. Yeah, you can vary them a little bit, but for example, if you're playing the halflings, easier one, mountain dwarfs. So you can pay wood cost with stone and ore. Okay, they like stone and ore. And you can do more delving when you're in the mountains, like inside your base. Okay, cool. But then it's harder for you to build outside, but you don't suffer any negative VP for outside. So this is clearly telling you, mine inside your cave, don't do stuff outside. So it does kind of pigeonhole you in a sense. But then there's a lot of different factions, so you get a lot of different play styles. So you could understand that maybe teaching this to new players is not necessarily a bad thing. Will they do well? Who knows? But then, to be honest, doing well in your first game of Caverna is hard enough anyway. But the idea that if I give you a faction that says don't go outside, you don't have to care about all the mechanics that mean go outside. So it's less for that player to have to remember in their heads in terms of the rules. So I can see the argument both ways, and I'll be interested to know your comments for anybody who has used this expansion. Do you teach it with the expansion or not? Be interested to know. But what this does do is that it elevates the game from basically 9 out of 10 territory to 10 out of 10 territory. It's just that good with it, because there's a lot of different factions in there. When you've got the different buildings, the unique buildings that they bring out so that they replace some of the older ones, it adds an extra nice bit of variety for the game. Doesn't even include that many new rules, because the rules are basically on the faction tile itself, and you just might have 1 or 2 extra pieces like gem fruit and mushrooms and stuff, which again are pretty straightforward. So it is an easy one to throw into the game without even having to teach a new set of rules on top, and that's again a hallmark of a great expansion. This is definitely one of the best expansions that exists out there for a game. So Caverna, Keeper, of course. I love this game. This game is one of my favorite games. It's a top 100 game every year, and this just makes it better. The newest expansion, garbage, get it out of my face. But these two together, I mean, some people have stored it in the box by itself, but I'd argue that your setup is probably not as convenient as this one is, and frankly, it's not that much extra space to put that on top of it really when you compare the two, so it's fine. And everything that you've seen here fits on that calyx square, and it's all good. So yeah, I love Caverna. I still really adore it. Is it as good as Fields of Arle? No, I still prefer Fields of Arle because that game is just like, gold dust to me. But I stand by my decision that I prefer this to Agricola, we agree to disagree. I respect Agricola, which is more than I do for a bunch of other like heavy Euros I'm not a fan of. But you know, and honestly, if I had to play Agricola, I have done in the past. I have actually sat down and said, you know what, I'll play a game of Agricola. Probably won't win, but you know what, the farming theme is enough to get me involved because I love this theme. The farming themes that Uri Rosenberg does always just sing to me. I don't know why. I'm not even a farmer. Yet granted, I come from Somerset in the UK, which is basically farmer country.
'Cause I ain't got a brand new combine harvester, and I'll give you the key.
But still, I've not worked on a farm. I don't know, I just kind of give respect to nature and animals, and, you know, I give respect to farmers. They go through hell to put food on my table, so, you know, I can't exactly, you know, say bad things at all. It's just a theme that works, and this game is one of my favourites in that genre, Caverna, the Cave Farmers. So that's it for me. I'll see you on the next episode of The Broken Meeple. Remember, if you like what you see, please thumb this up on YouTube and get the comments down below and let me know your thoughts on any of these games and anything I've mentioned, because it always improves engagement. Until next time, well, you can check out the content I've just been suggesting, Atiwa, Great Plains and the Fiendish expansion. By all means, check out those, and if you want to get a head start on this series, then by all means, episode 1 came out only about a week or so ago with some Days of Wonder games. Until next time, remember, regardless of what you might think about fruit bats, it's still only a game. Bye for now.